list. The actual runes that we would tend to be buying and tend to be using in general in League of Legends. And it's roughly 4 to 6 runes per bucket. A few marks, a few seals, a few glyphs. Let's jump into that now. So the primary thing is marks. Let's start with this one. And basically, you're only going to be really using up to 6 marks in general when using common pages. The most common mark we're actually going to be using in League of Legends is attack speed. 1.7% attack speed per click. If you put all 9 of them in, it actually gives you 15% attack speed. This was actually used in 24 of the 75 pages that I went and looked at when looking at all the math and looking at all the statistics. So this is very, very common for basically anyone who lands auto attacks. It's very common for top laners who land auto attacks, even top lane tanks. It's a pretty big deal. Attack damage marks are also pretty big. This is kind of the rest of the auto attackers here. Lots of marksmen, but you're noticing not all marksmen because we're only using it on some of them. And in general, it's of course very good in itself. And really just all the ones listed here are good. Lethality makes sense for obvious reasons. Right? It gives you 14.4 lethality, which is sort of the new version of armor penetration, and unsurprisingly, it's very good on the assassin, but it's also very good on marksmen like Misfortune and Jhin and Varus. Even if you're playing bot lane versions of those champions, lethality still tends to win more than attack damage on those champions. Magic penetration, for very obvious reasons, is good on mages. It gives you 7.8 magic pen. That's not a big surprise for anybody here. But also what's interesting is we are seeing a lot of precision actually be successful on various pages, which is hybrid penetration. And that was in 6 of the 75 pages. It's a little bit less common, but it's really seen much more frequently on mages who tend to auto-attack a lot more. And this was champions like Fizz, who wanted magic pen but also lands auto-attacks, on a champion like Orianna, and also some of the bot lane supports who were landing spells as well as auto-attacks. Nami being an example of this as someone who would use hybrid penetration essentially as their rune type. And then finally, the last rune we were seeing a lot of in the marks was flat armor. And this is if you're really not doing any damage as a champion. You're playing Janna, for example. It's even fine on champions like Morgana and the aforementioned Nami, because your damage output really isn't that important, especially later on in the game, but staying alive never goes out of fashion and tends to be really good. As far as seals that we care about, a little bit of new technology, not really incredibly crazy, but it's really worth pointing out that if you could only ever buy one rune in all of League of Legends, it is Scaling Health Seals. Scaling Health Seals are the best rune in League of Legends. More than half of all rune pages will use Scaling Health Seals. It kind of matters what lane you're playing in, and it kind of matters what your lane opponent is to a certain extent. But Scaling Health Seals are the best rune in League of Legends. They are the winningest seal on almost every single champion. They are most commonly used in roles where you're going to be gaining a lot of levels. I know that's not a surprise to many of you. Most people are running flat armor seals, and that's still good in some cases, but it's much, much, much less common when looking at the win rates of runes than we were seeing before. So even if you're playing top lane Renekton and you know you're probably facing against an Aurelia or a J7 in the top lane, it's really not a big deal. You'd probably still rather run Scaling Health Seals because you can suffer through the slightly weaker laning phase and then move on, and life gets a whole lot easier for you. Really, the math works out that Scaling Health Seals are very good. Now, what's also interesting is that flat health seals are actually the second most sort of common winningest seal. Now, flat health seals fall off very hard against an individual damage type. Like if you're going to compare flat health seals to flat armor seals, and you're taking damage from Renekton, flat armor will last longer into the game for you for kind of obvious reasons. It's targeted to a single damage type. But the point is really though that nothing beats flat health at level 1. Period, at all in the game. Nothing does, and that means that this is easily the most common rune that you're going to see on supports who don't level up very much and are going to be focused fired a little bit and care about their level 1 durability. What was also interesting is that, again, based on win rates, this was better than flat armor on most AD carries. And this is going to come as a shock to many of you guys, because every single pro player I know and every single AD carry that I know runs flat armor on AD carries all the time. And the numbers are suggesting this isn't actually the best case, or the best way to play the game. Now, why is this? Well, certainly, as we talked about a little bit ago, if you're taking only physical damage, and especially if you're going to be regenerating and life-stealing and using health potions, armor will serve you a bit better than flat health will. But we know from playing League of Legends, it's not the Caitlyn that's doing all the damage to you in the lane. Now, certainly, if you're in a laning phase such as specifically Draven Janna, okay, sure, it is an all-physical lane. Caitlyn Janna, kind of the same situation here. Really Janna lanes in particular are how this works with any non-mixed damage AD carry. But what's really worth pointing out is we're seeing Karma and Morgana and Brand, and in fact, I will specifically list the most common supports that get played right now in League of Legends, and the top, 15, Thresh, okay, he's actually pretty magic damage heavy and does a fair bit. Some physical as well. Janna, okay, that's all physical. Alistair, pretty magic heavy. Leona, pretty magic heavy. Nami, magic heavy. Morgana, magic heavy. Blitzcrank, magic heavy. Karma, magic heavy. Braum, magic heavy. Zyra, magic heavy. Soraka, not much damage, but it is magic. Bard, a bit mixed, but he's 75% magic. Sona, very magic heavy. Brand, very magic heavy. And Nautilus, very magic heavy. And even then, some of the AD carries, you're seeing champions like Corki and Ezreal who do a fair bit of mixed magic damage out here. And the point really stands that if you think bot lane is entirely physical damage, you are very wrong. And that if armor and flat health are somewhat similar in general power, and that's true, health then automatically wins because you're taking a lot of magic damage. And that's really worth understanding, that I think we need to see some kind of sea change here, in that flat health seals are better than people are giving credit for. To further that point, when you get into the mid game, your primary source of death is going to be that fed LeBlanc or that fed Victor or that fed Lissandra, and guess what? They don't care how much armor you have. So at level 1 in the laning phase, flat health is better, and scaling health will eventually catch up to something like flat armor as well, and in the late game, if you're a champion that's going to get hit by mages, which is everybody, health is again better than armor. And so I think we need to see a lot more health seals and scaling health seals that we're not seeing. Because this is such a big difference from what everyone else is doing, I spent a lot of time talking about this, but I think it's really important to point out. This is also true for junglers. The winningest seal for most junglers who don't have abysmally terrible clears is also scaling health seals. Certain ones are still running flat armor. For example, Evelynn, who has a very hard time clearing the jungle and staying healthy, is still in that kind of boat, but professional players have been for quite a while now actually shifting over to scaling health seals more often. We're seeing much more of that right now in League of Legends in the pro scene, but we're still seeing 90% of the time the general player is running flat armor in the jungle, and that's actually not correct. Now to quickly talk about the other seals that we tend to see in League of Legends, scaling health and flat health are by far the most common and the ones that you should be picking up. Third most common is actually scaling armor, and this comes as a shock, I think, to many of us, but scaling armor has been known, I think, for pros for a while as a very good rune, and it's a nice hedge between flat armor and scaling health. It actually wins more games than flat armor does in the general sense. This rune breaks even pretty early on. It breaks even with flat armor at, I believe it's level 6, so it's really, really not hard to get there at all. Yeah, in fact, yeah, you can see 27 right there for scaling seals, and then unfortunately I can't actually do it that way. But trust me, the break-even point is level 6. You're usually not getting all in and immediately assassinated before then, so really your level 1 through 5 armor is not as important as you may think. And farther on down the game, especially if you're playing, a mage and you're going to get like a Riley's Crystal Scepter for your health bar, you might consider running scaling armor. Not the specific case really, but again, if you're playing like an Aurelia or a Gnar, and you're going to be getting a Black Cleaver for yourself, maybe a Sterix Gauge, and you're going to be getting some health items, and you're facing a lot of physical damage from the jungle, from the top lane, scaling armor isn't bad. Yes, we may see some flat armor from some champions, and really this is the only 4 main seals you're going to see: scaling health, scaling armor, flat health, flat armor, and then there are some very specific examples. Scaling health regen is good on Soraka, and though I didn't buy it, attack speed is actually very good on Shaco, but I really didn't include runes that only showed up on one champion as its most winningest rune. As far as the glyph shopping list, it actually gets a little bit more spread out here. The most commonly used, oops, that's actually incorrect, is scaling, cooldown reduction. You can see I have a lot of runes picked out, and there's actually a lot of good seals out, or sorry, a lot of good glyphs out here. Scaling cooldown reduction is absolutely great. It's very, 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 very strong. I highly recommend the rune. If you can only ever use one type of glyph, it is this one. Every single mage that's not very obviously not cooldown reliant cares about this. For example, Katarina doesn't care about scaling cooldown reduction, and Rumble, I believe, doesn't really care about cooldown reduction either. But basically, if you're any kind of a mage, and in fact, most top laners care about scaling cooldown reduction. Of these 75 champions that I sampled, 32 of them, their best glyph was scaling cooldown reduction. For those that weren't doing scaling cooldown reduction, and keep in mind, this is basically every solo laner, right? We only looked at 30 solo lanes, and then, okay, 15 junglers, and then there's some AD carries that care about this as well, and 1 or 2 supports that care about this rune, but basically, more often than not, if you're in a solo lane, you want scaling cooldown reduction. It's a great rune. If you weren't using that, then you're going to be using flat cooldown reduction a lot of the time, and these 2 runes combined make up 43 of the 75 pages we looked at, where now at more than half are running some form of CDR. And again, this is just really good, especially if you care about your early game a lot. This applies a lot to junglers. Champions like Olaf and Lee Sin care about this kind of thing because your level 1 clear tends to be important. The faster you kill the camps, the better off you are. Level 1 clear speed is a very important thing to index toward. It's pretty useful to do. Other good runes, actually surprisingly, attack speed popped up as a highly winning glyph type. I don't know a lot of pros, well, I take that back. Some professional AD carries run attack speed glyphs. Forgiven specifically runs 9 all the time on everybody, and he doesn't run magic resist, and the numbers seem to back up his story as the correct way to build a rune page. I know lots of pros will only run 3 to 5 of these, and the rest will be magic resist, and they'll sprinkle in like maybe scaling magic resist, maybe some flat magic resist, maybe some attack speed, maybe it's 3, 3, and 3, but a lot of AD carries are running some attack speed glyphs. Now we were seeing this glyph commonly as the winningest rune in 11 of our 75 example pages, so it's actually pretty common. Or reasonably common. Of course, we're not going to see it on mages. Of course, we're not going to see it on tanks. But of the people who do land auto attacks a lot, like a Lee Sin jungle cares about this, a Master Yi jungle cares about this, maybe a Shaco jungle might care if he didn't already want ability power, which he does. We're going to talk about that later. But actually, more often than not, on a bot lane AD carry, attack speed was a winninger rune than magic resist in the general sense. You're also seeing this sometimes in champions like Aurelia, who, you know, if you didn't really care about your magic resist, then maybe you got some more attack speed and you started fighting your opponent a bit better. We were seeing that rune a little bit. The next most common glyph was scaling magic resist. If you weren't going to care about specifically cooldown reduction or attack speed, you would go into scaling magic resist. Now, it's worth noting, flat magic resist was almost never seen as the winningest glyph type. Quickly going through my notes, there were exactly 2 champions where their winningest glyph was flat magic resist, and that was basically Nautilus support and Corki AD carry, and only because really Corki doesn't scale that hard off attack speed and really doesn't even scale that hard off of CDR because he's mana gated pretty heavily from the bottom lane because he's not getting any blue buffs, and then Nautilus just turns out he likes magic resist because he's a tank. In general, though, it's worth pointing out that scaling MR is very good, and specifically you're seeing it a lot on top lane tanks who don't super need CDR very heavily, and this is again can be champions like Aurelia, it can be champions like Gnar. This is a more common user of that kind of rune. It can also be junglers who don't need that much CDR to get through their lives to do good things. Champions again who could be like Lee Sin and Olaf, where they're not really cooldown gated, but they do want to survive team fights, and this is a lot of the melee junglers who want to get durable by the team fight phase. Scaling magic resist is a very good rune for that. We were seeing a little bit of ability power. This is specifically mages who jungle. Evelyn and Shaco, oddly enough, are 2 of these champions because they care about their AP ratios. Turns out Jack-in-the-Boxes are really important for Shaco's clear speed, and flat AP is good for that. Flat AP is Shaco's best glyph, believe it or not. Again, Evelyn for obvious reasons. Even though I didn't look at the page specifically, champions like Rumble might want this. There's a couple of mid lane and especially support mages who care about this kind of thing, because depending on the champion you're playing, cooldown reduction, ability power do very similar things, and based on math and breakpoints and whatnot, you might want AP instead. A champion like Soraka, for example, can easily run out of health using CDR, but with ability power just have more efficient heals, and that can sometimes be just a better thing to do. We also saw a little bit, as we get farther and farther into the dregs, of scaling ability power, and this is basically, to specifically talk about it, if you're a mage and you don't care about CDR, and the real obvious examples of this are Kennen and Rumble and Katarina, and we'll go into those pages when we see them in the actual page breakdown, are doing scaling AP. Now, it's worth pointing out that in general, I don't recommend getting all 9 of these. A lot of the time, you're only going to get 3, and the reason why, as we talk about glyphs, is very many professional mid-lane mage players are doing this. They do 6 scaling CDR glyphs, and then 3, most of them do flat magic resist, but I'm actually of the belief that scaling ability power is actually the superior rune to bring in this slot, because essentially it's very easy to get 30 CDR as a mid lane mage. You're getting it off of Zhonya's or Abyssal Scepter for 10, and you're getting 20 off of Morellonomicon, and those items are very commonly bought by champions, so you tend to easily reach 30 CDR via your item build, and then you're looking for the other 10 somewhere else. A champion like Victor is not going Morello, so they might go cooldown boots and Zhonya's, and maybe they can't quite reach Abyssal as well, so maybe they want all 15 CDR because they're not going to reach 40 anyway. That can be fine, but that's based on the champion you're playing, and you've got to kind of figure out what your build is going to be. Again, a lot of pros go 10 CDR via the glyphs, and then you've got 3 to fit in whatever you want, and we'll talk about what's very good there as well. As a disclaimer, I don't believe I bought these runes, but they did show up. Mana regeneration glyphs showed up on a couple of different champions, specifically supports. Flat mana regeneration, however, it showed up very rarely, and it wasn't much better than other runes, so I didn't choose to include them. Also, there are a couple of aggro supports that can use magic penetration glyphs very well, Zyra being the primary example. If you find yourself playing a lot of Zyra, then feel free to grab magic penetration glyphs. They are mathematically, according to win rates, superior than flat ability power glyphs on that champion. Let's go down into Quintessences one more time, or as our last set of runes, and there are actually quite a lot of different runes. There's basically 6 that I'm going to recommend you actually try to invest in. I have more than this. You don't really need all of these to be efficient, but the most commonly used based on win rate quintessence is attack speed quints. Attack speed quints are very good. They are almost ubiquitous on bot lane marksmen. They are very good on top lane fighters as well. If you really, really don't auto-attack very much, and this could be champions like Riven and maybe, and this is debatable, Renekton, who, you want to say they're more spell-based than auto-attack based, you can consider running attack damage instead. But really, if you are, in general, auto-attacking as a major part of how you play the game, you are probably running attack speed quints. And what's funny is you're even seeing, and we'll get into this in the future, champions like Maokai, who you'd feel really weird about running attack speed on, actually care about quite a bit, because Maokai often can run Grasp of the Undying, and even if he's not, he needs to land auto attacks to heal himself in team fights, and the faster his auto attack comes out, the faster he gets that heal and starts the new counter. Oddly enough, Maokai auto attacking is an important part of his combo, of how he plays the game, and attack speed quints are actually one of Maokai's best quintessences. As weird as it sounds, it's actually that core to how the champion plays, and that should kind of inform you of how inclusive the idea of, do I auto attack a lot? If so, I probably want this quint. Do not underestimate attack speed quints. They are very, very good. The second winningest quintessence here was actually a surprise to me, and it's move speed quintessences. Turns out that movement speed is an incredibly important statistic in League of Legends. Now, we saw some glimpses of this in professional play. We see a lot of professional supports go for boots of mobility, even if they were going to be very good users of cooldown reduction. We see lots of AD carries and supports and whatnot, and junglers run boots of swiftness, even though we know they could be using tank boots or cooldown boots or attack speed boots and things like that. Win rates show us that move speed is incredibly, incredibly valuable. And even though a lot of supports will want to run ability power or armor, and a lot of mages in the mid lane will want to run flat ability power, the numbers tell us that move speed Quints are actually obscenely useful on a lot of different types of champions. And so it's worth pointing out that move speed Quints have a lot of use on a lot of different people. And it's specifically basically mid-range type champions who need to be in combat and need to kite in and out a little bit. And this is the second most sort of winningest quintessence based on the champions that we sampled. The next most champion should be, or the next most rune should be of no surprise to anyone, that is flat ability power quintessences. The users here are very obvious. Now, what's interesting is, again, of the 75 champs we looked at, only 11 of them said that flat AP quints were their best rune, or their best quint. Now, again, it's worth pointing out that AP and move speed were very close together. In a lot of cases, they were within 1%, and when that's the case, I will point them out to you when I show you these champions and show you their rune pages. So if you don't want to spend the IP, or you just don't care, and you don't really want to do that full min-maxing, that's fine. A lot of these are very close together anyway, and again, we'll get into that in the future. But AP quints, I think their uses are really no big surprise. People who care about their AP ratios. Next up is actually a pretty big deal, and it's flat armor quints. Flat armor quintessences are actually very, very, very good. The amount of stats they give is very, very high. This gives you a lot of armor. This is almost any tank. A lot of top laners will run armor quints because, well, they want to survive Renekton, and this is the big reason why I think scaling health seals can be so good. Because you can get much more armor by simply running armor quints. Heck, if you're super greedy, you can only run 2. I don't recommend it. I think these are that good. If you're going to run armor, you'd run all 3. But you can get 13 armor, bonus armor at level 1 by running 3 armor quints, and then you are completely free to go ahead and run yourself those scaling health seals. And if you're worried about getting killed by your lane opponent, bam, there you go. And a lot of these top lane tanks like a Maokai, even a Singed can care about this, but you know, a Malphite, a Rammus, a Maokai, things like this, Nautilus, especially in the support role. Armor quints are a big deal. We saw 9 of them across our 75 sampled rune pages. They're really quite good. Lethality, 9.6, actually came up as a very highly winning rune. And what's worth pointing out is this rune showed up more than attack damage did as a quintessence for the most winning quintessence. And the users here are no big surprise, right? It's going to be your typical Kha'Zix, Rengar, these types, the Zeds of the world, no big surprise. And even though running lethality instead of running attack damage can hurt your ability to last hit because you're only running around at 60 AD and not 75, and yes, that can make last hitting harder, win rates tell us lethality does better. And then in a lot of cases, this is over very large sample sizes of over 10,000 games of lethality versus 90,000 games of attack damage, and lethality was winning more games. There are some champions where their sample sizes were a bit smaller. They were like 1,000, 1,800, 3,000, things like that, and I will usually disclaimer those when I see it. But win rates tell us that lethality is a very good rune type, even after all the changes. It's still very good, it seems, in 2017. And if you find yourself playing a lot of attack damage assassins, or even, and I'd have to look at these numbers to be sure, and we'll go over those pages in a bit, sort of sniper attack damage champions, such as Jace and Misfortune and Jhin and Varus, they're going to be running lethality quite a lot as well. And then finally, the one other rune that I recommend seeing in some frequency is actually magic penetration quintessences. Basically, this is exclusively used on mage supports who are trying to do a lot of damage and want to poke you out with their spells, and they're typically Thunderlords users, with Zyra being a prime example of this, and it turns out that flat magic penetration is very good for that. And that's what the math tells us. Now, it's worth pointing out there are a few other one-ofs. Once again, I went and looked at the 15 most played champions in each of the roles, and a few things came up exactly once. Lifesteal is one of them. This is for Yasuo. No big surprise here. Flat cooldown reduction I did not buy because I don't really play the champion. Goes in for Zac because turns out Zac only cares about how many spells he lands, not how really good they are. in the jungle, so he was a CDR user. And then, interestingly enough, Sona actually used gold Quintessences pretty effectively, and a few other supports had them as like the second or third best Quintessence as well. And this is a little bit greedy, but it's basically for champions who they don't really scale off raw AP, but they really scale off getting items. And Sona is a good example of this, where she's going to just try not to die in the laning phase anyway, but getting into Redemption and getting into Ardent Censer is a really big deal. And supports who are very good at using good support items will tend to use gold Quintessences. And Sona, because she can shield her entire team, Nami for sort of similar reasons, Karma for sort of similar reasons, those champions use gold Quints very, very well. So that's the rundown of the shopping list of all the runes that I recommend to pick up. We will then go